Hello and welcome to Two Studio Heads Walk Into a Bar, a series of online conversations where we discuss the business side of running small creative services. I'm Souvik. I run a strategic web design and development studio called Miranj.
Hello, I'm Tejas. I run a small design studio called Three Sided Coin, based out of multiple places in India.
And today at the bar, we have got with us Meeta Malhotra. Meeta is a brand strategist and a serial entrepreneur. She was one of the two partners at Ray and Keshavan, a design consultancy which was acquired by WPP. Then she went on to co-found a SaaS company called Kinetic Blue, which is later acquired by BMC Software. And now she continues to consult and run a website called The Hard Copy, which publishes case studies and insights around brand and design in India. Welcome to the show, Meeta.
Thank you for having me.
So we can't think of anyone better than you to discuss our topic for today, which is branding and positioning your studio. Now, as people who run creative studios, this is a subject we are dealing with all the time in our work, especially in the client context. We are advising our clients to have the great branding done. But when the subject is actually turned around to ourselves on our studio, then it doesn't feel like a simple topic anymore. You go into existential thinking, and it's something that you love to procrastinate. So I think this is a subject which is very important for us to reflect on how to apply to ourselves as studio owners. So let's start with just setting a context. Now, brands are very well understood in the B2C context because it's also, whenever we take names of brands, they are generally B2C companies all over, selling products, selling services to end consumers. But how relevant is branding in the context of creative studios, which are mostly B2B? And also in our case, we are talking about small studios. And when I say small studios, I mean, say, sub 15 people studios. We're not talking about the large brands as well. So how relevant is it for creative studios to think about branding and build a good brand?
So first of all, Souvik, just being here, I think is evidence of the fact that you, Tejas, and the people in your audience are thinking about studio branding, right? And honestly, it's not that I think it's extremely important. It's my life's work. But whether it's B2C or B2B or service branding, which is what we're really talking about, and then within service branding, creative services branding, I think the problem is not the importance. The problem is that it's seldom discussed. So B2C, very well understood. B2B also actually extremely well understood now in a sophisticated, ecosystem. Services branding, perhaps not so much. And creative services branding, no one ever talks about it. Because as you said, it's a thorny problem. And all of us, we have this excuse of just being too busy and putting it off.
Agree. But why do you think that happens though? Why do you think creative services are not able to really think about that? Is that what really causes that?
So I think that there are a couple of reasons, and perhaps the biggest one is that there's this whole misconception around what constitutes a brand, right? And going back to the simplest definition of what is a brand, which applies across the spectrum, B2B to, the largest B2C brands to the smallest creative studio brands. And I didn't say this, Bezos did. A brand is what people say about you, sorry, when you're not in the room, right? It's as simple as that. And I think that a lot of times branding is confused. Studio people think that it means getting PR coverage. It means having, thousands of followers on Twitter. It means giving talks. It means networking and going to cocktail parties. I mean, so it just seems so hard. And particularly, if you're an introverted founder, that you just put it off. That's one reason, the fact that it seems hard. Two, and this is not I'm probably going to get cancelled by a lot of studio founders for saying this. I think you're a bit scared because, you're here, you are advising your clients on communication, which whatever you do, regardless, all of us in some way are in the process, in the business of communication.
Yeah.
And if you don't do a good job for yourself, I mean, you've tried and you haven't done a good job for yourself, I think it might be a bit worrying for you. So I think you also put it off because of that discomfort.
Right. No, I completely agree with the second part. I actually agree a lot with the second part, that it just seems that you take something as simple as if you design certain things for your clients, but if that certain thing is not very well done for in your own case, you're just afraid of it. So you just keep saying that, "Oh, we never get around to doing this for ourselves." So your response to
Exactly.
that becomes that you don't have time for it, rather than the fact that you haven't taken it up just for the fear of failing at it or not doing matching up to your own expectation. So yeah, so then how do you define a brand for a studio? Like, how do you say that, from taking from that
Yeah.
Bezos definition, how do you actually convert that
Right.
to a studio's context?
So I think there are 3 or 4 dimensions to a studio brand, right? One is, and I think paramount is the body of creative work that you put out, and that is
Mhm.
that is your biggest evidence for people to see what you've done. This is very much a show and tell business. All of us are in that. So if we are, and it's good. I'm happy about the fact that people have gotten a lot better at it. Just because you have now you have platforms like Instagram, where it seemed very hard. I think even today most studios don't have great websites, but at least on social media, whether it's Twitter, whether it's whatever is your preferred channel of choice, at least there you are showcasing your work. So that's something. And you're showcasing it fast, not months after a project is completed. So one is your creative body of work. The second, which I think not a lot of people think about, is your culture. And this is something that people don't talk about enough.
Yeah,
In a creative business, culture is paramount because you
yeah,
are as good as your people. So what kind of culture do you have in the studio which attracts the best talent, where people will give up bigger, fatter salaries in large conglomerates to come and work in your small studio? Where is the evidence of that? So I think, culture is very, very important. And are you the kind of studio that is known for, okay, we'll get the job done in a short, we'll meet your deadlines, but if it means compromising a little on quality, we will? Is that our culture? Or is the culture that, no, we will push the bar? So there can be many nuances to it. I think the third one is, how well are you respected in your industry or domain, right? Do people look to you for advice on where this field is going? Because we're all in, creative fields means, and technology is having a disproportionate effect on them, that these fields are constantly evolving every day. So are you the go-to sort of source for information about the future of that domain or industry? I think that, for want of a better word, thought leadership
mm,
is something that's talked about. And that, yeah, that's the
yeah,
third dimension to a studio brand. And I would say the last one, and again, something that people don't talk about enough, is what is the experience of working with you? See, this is true for all
mm,
services brands. And you'd be surprised at how concrete this is. So clients will speak to each other, and
yeah,
this is the first thing they talk about. What was the experience of working with that studio? Was it terribly difficult? Did we have to chase them? I mean, just 100 things. Do they do good work, but they're very tough to work with? All kinds of, again, nuances to that. So I would say those 4 things, if you get right, you're on your way to building a studio brand.
that is very interesting. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just a follow up on that. Now you've defined uh, from an external audience point of view the industry, potential clients, and probably potential hires in a way.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking of a branding, how would you rate as how would you prioritize these three? Uh, which aspect should one focus on more for creative service businesses, small studios like us? Where should we focus more than the other? Or maybe at which one comes first and which one comes later? Maybe that might be the better question
Yeah.
in your view.
So I would say the first one is just table stakes today. if people don't know what you are working on and what you are doing, then you're going to really struggle. I mean, that unless there's a myth around you or something. But so I would say first focus on like hygiene, get your work out there. Most important as a small studio. And then I would say talk about your culture. Because again, the work that you do, if you have see again, I mean, if you're just going to be two people and that's the important thing for you, it's different. But if you want to hire and you want to grow your team, then that is the most important, that is the one thing that is going to attract people to you. Because face it, right, we can't compete on salaries. So we have to compete on culture. And for creative people, it's very important to know that they are in a place where they can do work they will be proud of. So
No,
those two, and the rest can
hmm.
follow.
So how does this when you do all those things, when you are putting that, and let's say you build up a very or a strong brand, you start building a very strong brand. How and in what different ways does it start to really help a studio? Some because again, uh, you might be constrained by a lot of things, and so how does the brand actually uh, help you?
Yeah, no, totally. Because, until you see the value of that, you're not going to do it. You're going to keep putting it
Yeah.
off. That's
Mhm.
the problem. Like when it's theoretical, but actually, and this is my personal experience, it pay off in so many different ways. One is that, the more obvious things, right? Inbound. One of the things that we tracked greatly at Rain Keshavan, we tracked very strongly was our volume of inbound inquiries. To me, that was a metric of success. How many people call us every day? Which, and that, so I would say that it will pay off. You will get a larger number of inbound. I'm talking about really tactical things here, right? Two, you will be able to charge a premium, because pricing is a very nebulous thing in our industry, which can be a good and bad thing. But because it's so nebulous and there are no really fixed rates, you will be, if you have a strong brand and a strong reputation, you will be able to charge a premium. Then of course you will be able to attract better and higher quality people. There are just so many payoffs. And besides those three kind of big things, I think as founders, what do you want at the end of the day? Don't you want to leave behind, again, maybe I'm speaking for myself, don't you want to leave behind this legacy of having created a studio with impact? I mean, I think for all of us, that's also part of it, right?
That's a very important point, but I don't think people think about this when they are starting out. They think about this once they have collected enough body of work and they're reflecting back. And at that point of time, you have done the projects over and over again for probably a decade or 2 decades and all, and then you will think of, oh shit, I should have compiled them better and put it out, and made it something that people look up to. This realization comes very late, in my opinion.
Absolutely. No, no. And I can understand it. Look, we've all been there. You're so busy every day fighting, as part of a small studio, there are fires every day. There are deadlines, there are clients, there is, business development, there is working with your own people and the problems that you have. It's hard to say, okay, now I must carve out a chunk of time to do exactly the same thing for myself. Like it's really tough. But
True.
in the world we live in, so back then when we had Rain Kishore, I mean, talking so many years ago, then the competition was much less severe. And honestly, there were not that many means of distribution. Now, what's happening is, given the world that we live in, almost a chance that if you don't do this, you will be drowned out by people who are better at tactically at using these different channels of distribution. So the dangers are much more, and therefore the need to do this is much stronger.
This actually lends very well into our next question, which is, what are these channels of distribution? What are the channels that a studio can and should use, be it online, offline, in order to push out their brand? So let's just hear the channels from you, and then maybe then we can dive deeper in a few channels.
Yeah. So I don't think there's, Shavik, I don't think there's like a one size fits all answer to that. my advice to and I get asked this question a lot, right? Because, like I said, it's one of the fears. Oh God, does this mean we have to have millions of followers on social media? We can't do that. It's like the first reaction. And building presence on social media today, when, organic reach has been killed by practically every platform, is very painful and quite, it's quite disheartening. I mean, you go on posting, nothing happens. So I would say that it depends on what your comfort level is. Like, say, I speak for myself personally, right? I like Twitter. I mean, I'm not regular on it, but it comes naturally to me. Whereas LinkedIn, much as I know, and I tell, even my clients that for God's sake, up your LinkedIn presence because the highest ROI is coming from there. I just can't bring myself to post on LinkedIn. I don't know why. I've like actually set myself this task. You will post on LinkedIn, so whatever comes naturally. There are a lot of studios to whom visual studios, to whom Instagram is perhaps the right medium of choice. So I would say I would bucket all of these into social and say pick the ones that you are most comfortable with and pick one and master it. Like, it's quite hard to be a small organization and spread yourself thin across everything. I mean, and when I say that, I don't mean don't post on the others. I mean don't spend time repurposing content for every channel. It'll be quite difficult. At least master it on one channel and then just post it and see what happens. So that's the social part, right? Now, what else can you do? I think one very neglected aspect of studio brands is communication with clients, prospective, lapsed potential. And actually, that has far more impact than social, which, I mean, it's hard. Social organic is very, very hard. But how many of us really stay in touch with clients, and how many of us have a project to project sort of mindset, right? This
Relationship.
one is
Yeah.
done, great working with you, final payment is in the bank, goodbye, next project. And it's such a huge waste because, my God, how much have you invested in that relationship over the course of the project? And why would you not maintain that relationship just by having a basic communication strategy of, say, one email a quarter or something? I don't know what that strategy is in place.
Hmm.
And everyone wants to hear. So, if you even do a simple thing like not a mass emailer, but say you segment your potential / current client or past client list and just send them a personalized emailer saying, this is a new project we did. Let us know what you think of it. Even that is enough. And anyway, you're putting that content together. But stay in touch. Don't just drop off the map as far as they are concerned. So to me, that's the second big aspect of a studio brand. The third one I would say is what can you do in terms of, and this is hard, right? Events offline. What can you now? That's a tough one. I don't think everyone needs to do it, but I'm just pointing it out because again we are very reluctant to do it. So I've seen there are a bunch of founders who are very good at this offline, let's have a beer kind of networking, and there are a lots who say, nay, it's just too hard, I've had a long day, I'd rather go hang with my friends, I don't want to go meet but I would
The
say,
same people.
yeah, I'd say, don't just again completely drop off the map there. If there in your city there is the industry meeting, and as an industry we have been guilty of this, many times people have tried to set up forums, set up industry bodies. We have not succeeded
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
don't like to hang with each other. So I don't know for what reason, but yeah. So I think there's some amount of work to be done there as well.
Absolutely. I think some of these things are pretty quite eye-opening. Like when you were saying, and I was constantly checking myself, oh, guilty of this, guilty of this, guilty of this. There was such a great answer. There was such a great answer. So that actually brings me to the next question, because a few times I've reached out to certain agencies or certain people to understand who are in hardcore marketing and hardcore marketing, and they repeat the value of creating content. So
Hmm.
it's like, oh, like specifically LinkedIn, when you everyone tells you, hey, use LinkedIn and you should be creating X amount of content regularly. And that, like you were saying, that because you're constantly working, you want to kind of, at the end of it, you want to unplug from it, and creating content that becomes an overhead or an additional task for you. What
Absolutely.
do you think is the role of content, or constantly creating some content, and specifically in such a competing environment where content, again, like you were saying, organic reach of content is also very compromised at the
Yeah.
moment. So what do you see the role of content in this?
See, the way I look at it, I think it is much better to post something interesting, say once a week or even twice or thrice a month, something that gets people's attention, versus this kind of digital marketing agency view of feeding the algorithm, which I don't know if it applies to us as much as it applies to large consumer brands. It's okay for them to say post in the morning, post in the evening. I don't think for studios that's feasible or even has any impact, because the algorithm just buries you. So, and you've put in all that work. So instead of that, say if you say, let's take LinkedIn since you brought it up, I'm saying twice a month, can you post something that's really of value to the audience? Can you post a really interesting case study? Like the whole Indian, I mean, that's why I started hard copy. There's no case studies. And as there's just no one writes properly, nobody gives industry context. Everything is so, I mean, Shavik, not alluding to you at all, and neither to you, Tejas, but I'm just saying, so many times I see web design firms saying, first we made wireframes, then I mean, that's not a case study. For God's sake, everybody makes wireframes, So
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
back to your question, can you provide content of value
Yeah.
twice a month? To me, that
Hmm.
is fine. You will build a stronger brand
Hmm.
versus posting morning and evening and tiring yourself out and getting nothing in return. Study also, and we should be masters of this, study also formats. What is working on the channel that you are choosing? I mean, say for LinkedIn, I can tell you personally, like we never post, right? We have some 500 followers on LinkedIn. It's rubbish. And my team is also so into like Twitter and Instagram, they just ignore me when I say LinkedIn. But we did some experiments and we found that when we post a case study or whatever in a document PDF form where people on their phones can just go tuck 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 and they don't have to read large chunks of text, that's doing very well. So take the trouble to study format and then post something of value as often as you can, but not in this mad rush to create content.
Well, so when you're creating these content pieces, how do you evaluate or how do you determine that this is working well versus what is not working well? Is number of likes and shares the only way to measure it? What are the ways to know for sure that the thing that I actually did or actually wrote has actually proven to be useful and people are finding that good? That's something that we are always questioning. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome. There's a little bit of all those things. Am I good enough? If I produce it, will anyone read? I've produced it, I've put it on the blog post. I don't even know if anyone is finding it useful. How do you get over that, and how do you be sure that what you're putting out is actually reinforcing, helping your brand, and also helping people learn, putting you in a thought leadership position?
It's a great question. It's something I've grappled with a lot personally, right, with hard copy, because at the end of the day, we've chosen not to go down all of the SEO stuff, kind of like go down the path which will, and it's been hard because the stuff we are writing about is not the most popular stuff. It's dense, it's whatever. So how do you know? And very often this imposter syndrome will strike and say, Arey, we could have got more views. My SEO guy will tell me, but you refuse to listen and whatever. So but I just tell myself this, and I don't know if it's helpful, but I just say that even if two people who matter, and when I say matter, they fall into that ecosystem of their opinion matters to me. Even if two people have read it, to me, that's more important 50 people who have no impact on either my work or my life. Like volume, I know that social is measured by volume, but for our businesses, I would much rather that two, say, potential clients, potential hires, peers, just someone I respect has read, commented. That's enough for me. And that's the approach we take at hard copy also. If our audience is reading it, chalo theek hai. If there are 5 of them, that's good enough.
Yeah, this is a very interesting point, because what you're saying is like believe in I mean, get over the imposter syndrome, put it out,
Yeah.
and even if a few people consume it, that's value, and be and the more you do it, probably more people will be able to reach to you any which way. So have that faith in a way.
Yeah, because that's a function of the algorithm, right? The minute you get some engagement, it will start. Because the other way around is, if you start to optimize for things like likes and shares, you will produce subpar content. And let's not do that. That's not why we exist.
Yeah, you'll be lost in like bigger teams doing it a much better job than you in that.
Yeah, and I mean, it will actually damage your brand, because that's not a good reflection of who you are.
True. Yeah, I totally agree. I think for while you are saying this, I realize that uh, often I fall into that trap. But then coming back, if I am able to do that, figuring out that quality part rather than the quantity part, and noticing that, okay, whether it
Yeah,
is reaching to the quality of people I want to reach out to rather than the some 500 random people just liking it, commenting it. Uh,
yeah.
because the latter would probably happen with memes and other things, but not something I would really put some deep thought
Yeah.
into.
Just to close on that, I would add is that don't forget that it doesn't matter if you're going to get zero engagement on a post when someone comes looking for you, because that's the business we're in. We are a service provider, right? When someone comes looking for you, they will find that. So isn't that what you want them to see versus a set of random memes? I mean, I love memes, but I'm just saying even the memes should reflect your brand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If I turn this around a little bit, Meeta, and I'm also connecting this to the channel question that you answered, one of the ways you were answering the channel question, at least in my interpretation, was how do we reach out or maximize the amount number of people that we can reach out to, either through social media or by going to conference and actually speaking to lots of people. And also one
Yeah.
interesting thing that you mentioned is write to people who you have worked with or you potentially want to work with. And this is
Yeah.
the part I want to ask a little bit more. How do we be as like small studios, uh, we the founders are themselves involved in the sales. Founders are themselves involved in who what kind of projects you want to work with. It's not the job that is given to a sales team. We don't even have a sales team for that matter. So it's not about numbers. It's more about who do we want to work with, what
Yeah.
kind of projects we want, and we have some idea about it. So if we want to narrow down and say that these are some of the clients we want to be reaching out to or them to approach us, uh, connect both the channels as well as the content strategy piece in this. How do we do that kind of networking to be able to reach out to specific people who we really want to be working with, as opposed to the mass likes and the mass popularity?
So I think the way to do it is, first, if you have it's great if you have that sort of qualified set of people that you'd like to work with, ask yourself what is of value to them. Not, so instead of talking about yourselves, what is it that they are looking for? And let's take some examples now. For you, for instance, for Miranj, now everybody has a website, and it's always this, you are always worried about the fact that your website is not good enough, right? Now, is there something you can um, do in that sense, right, in that domain? And you're experts in that. So what can you do for clients that you want to work with to show them that you really know and really understand this space very well? I don't know what that specific answer could be, but that's the kind of staying in touch I'm talking to. One of the biggest reasons that a studio brand is built is because you make your clients succeed. Always remember that. Then they will refer you to other people. Then they will sort of give you good referrals. Then they will talk you up.
Right.
If you made whoever was your anchor, you made them succeed and you made them look good, because your anchor is, unless you're working for a very small startup, your anchor is rarely the CEO, right? I mean, it's usually a CMO or
Yeah,
product manager or somebody
yeah.
like that. What is of value to them? How can you make them succeed is the question that I would ask, and then address it through content.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that's a great point. It also reminds me something. We had a chat with someone else. Like I had a chat with someone else before, and their point was like, look at it this way, that everyone's fighting their battles, and what armors are you providing them
Exactly.
in your team? If
Yeah.
yeah, if you're providing them with the armors they need to succeed, then that's your success. That's your measure of success.
100%, 100%. We all, we are all guilty of sometimes setting up a almost confrontational relationship because it gets messy. Yeah? Any
Yeah,
creative project
yeah,
delivery,
yeah, yeah.
it'll be contentious, there'll be whatever, and we set up. And I'll bring up another point, which I don't know if So one of the things, and this is again a personal experience. What would happen is my partner and I at Rain Kishwan, so we'd come back from a particularly stormy client meeting, and maybe we'd be having coffee or whatever, and we'd say, bloody hell, he's such an idiot, and look at what they know. But what we didn't realize uh, was that we were saying that, but as founders, we had the maturity, the experience, so that was, we were just venting to each other, but we were never going to let that show externally. What we didn't realize is that our team was much younger, and this culture of, oh, he's an idiot, started seeping into the company. I was horrified when I heard someone talk to a client in this most dismissive manner. I was like, where is this coming from? And then after soul searching, we realized it's coming from us.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
absolutely, if that feeling of, hey, we are on opposite sides with the client starts to seep in, nip it in the bud. Most
yeah.
dangerous.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, because you were talking about team, I think that's a great segue to the next question. This is something uh, Souvik and I have talked about also, like offline a bit. Uh, for a creative studio, which is small, so it is also hopefully everywhere. It's very close knit
Yeah.
band of people. Should the branding be an effort that is top down, so it should be founder driven, or could it be more like a team driven effort, so everyone is doing their own thing and then everything adds up to the company's or the organization's brand?
I think again it differs from studio to studio. I think most studios are founder driven just by virtue of how they are set up, right? Because you have founders and then the team is, it's usually you don't initially have budgets for a very senior team. So the face of the company is the founder, and that's what people see. And I think that initially that's fine. How you proceed depends on your ambition. So I think that if you want to stay small and you're not thinking about potential exits, then it's fine. Just a purely founder driven brand for a studio is possibly, I mean, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it as long as the founder doesn't mind. Because let's discuss what happens when you have a founder driven brand. Clients will only want to meet the founder. You will not be able to pass a relationship on to anyone else in your team. I'm paying, I want to see that, because that's all they know. Firm equals founder, and therefore, and of course then questions of scaling, it becomes harder to scale, it becomes harder, exits become quite difficult. So if you, on the other hand, want to grow your business and you want to think about potential exits, then you have to start creating not just a strong second line of management but also a brand for the firm.
Understood, understood. And how do you do that? How do you actually convince your team members that this needs to happen? Because for you as a founder, uh, you might be able to understand that as a make or break kind of a thing, right? Like, this doesn't happen, we don't grow beyond this particular point. How do you
Right.
actually also communicate the value of doing this to your other team members?
I think you have to build a team, Tejas, that is as ambitious as you are. See, especially in the creative world, there are many different kinds of. I mean, I know some really amazing designers who have no desire to do any more work than they're doing right now. Honestly, they're just like, we're done. And because the last year has been so good, I think for all creative studios, and we're in May, people have said, up, we're done for 2022. Talk to us in 2023. We've made enough money. We're off to Goa now. So it depends on, if you are ambitious as a founder, then put together a team that will help you drive that ambition. Then you can't have people who are not interested in scaling. That's never going to work. You can't convince them.
Right, right. Yeah.
Oh wow!
Absolutely.
So this is a very nice insight that if you have to have a team that is engaged in being the face of the organization, you need to get team members who
Yeah.
have that ambition.
Yeah.
It's hard to grow people to reach that, or is it more just more time taking?
No, I think it's your essential character. So if you have younger people who maybe don't have the capability or the sophistication, you can definitely grow them. But if you just have people, like I said, who we very often encounter in our industry, who are just not interested in that growth, who are just happy with the work they do every day, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the type of person you are. Then you will find it very difficult to grow. So at least that seed of ambition has to be there, and then you can definitely, help them grow and help them acquire the capabilities that you need.
Right, and if you are letting the team grow and take over the brand, how do you give a direction? Because you have some things in mind and you have a opinion, and that's how you would want the brand to be. But the
Right.
moment it's something that is shared between 10 people in your team, they may not think and align in the same way, or they might want to go in a different. So how do you build that consensus? How do you build that, grow the team into thinking along the same lines that you are thinking and where you want to take the studio?
So I think that, it goes without saying that you have to have consensus, because if you can't build consensus amongst 10 people, how are you going to
Mhm.
build your brand amongst hundreds, right? So, I mean, you have to have
So,
consensus. Now the question becomes, how do you get that consensus? And I think
mm,
that, pretty much do the exercises that you set out for your clients to do. You drive consensus for your clients, do you not? Use the same
yeah.
strategy to drive consensus in your team. And
Right.
just as on your client teams, at the end of the day, there's a lot of discussion, but one person will have sort of, final say. So should it be in a studio. Lots of open discussion, take on board everybody, but finally, in a small 10-person team, the founder knows where this should go. Other people will come and go. So at the end of the day, you have to finally provide that direction.
Right, and do you think there's a lot of role of how what kind of leadership quality the founder is able to show? Because often, as being creative folks ourselves, we are far more uh, trying to get ourselves better in the craft. We are trying to get better at design, we are trying to get better at copywriting, we are trying to get better at strategy, whatever work we are doing. But then we are not always thinking of us, how do we get better as a leader, to be able to drive that consensus within the team, to be able to project that kind of a vision and have that shared vision with the team. Do you think the leadership is capability, and how you project your put it out, also has a role to play, and how do we hone that?
I think that's key. And again, it depends on your ambition. So if you're going to stay a small person team, say two founders plus say two or three other people, then it's fine. Then you just stay engaged in your craft, because you don't need some great leadership capabilities to steer a team of five, right? Or six, or whatever that is. But if you have ambitions to scale, then actually, sadly, you will, if you speak to founders who have successfully scaled, you will find that towards that time, they practice their craft less and less. It's a tragedy, but it's true. And they spend much more time on, like, they have to deliberately carve out time for the craft, because they have to spend their time on leadership and vision.
Yeah.
There's no other way to do it. There's just no other way to do it. So it's a trade off.
True.
Makes sense. Would you have any suggestions for introverted founders?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you don't have to be extroverted to build a brand. That's just not true. Not everybody, needs to be Elon Musk. Some of the greatest founders are very introverted. Just your work, we're so lucky that we're in an industry that is, like I said, show and tell. Your work speaks for itself. So you absolutely don't have to be, just being introverted and being focused on other things is a brand by itself. That's part of your brand. And
Mm.
there is great appreciation for people like that. I don't think that your that clients necessarily find the people with the largest Twitter followings to be the most effective. I don't agree with that.
Is
Yeah.
it at all possible to, uh, I'm saying, outsource or maybe have someone in the team who would lead the communication rather than you as a founder, or do you think that the founder should lead the communication?
No, no, no. It should be somebody on your team, and you just provide the guidelines. You cannot, and that's not a good use of your time at all. You should be focusing on the other stuff, the leadership, definitely have and what I've seen some studios do effectively is a rotation.
Hmm.
So,
Okay.
yeah, that's worked well because it's fun. And, before it gets tiresome, it's the next person has to take it on. So, yeah. So, as long as you have the broad guardrails, it's fine.
So, what are some of the traits, and I think this will be my last question in this, that what are some of the traits that you think that a founder should look for in the team members to see them as like, okay, this person can be the brand ambassador for our team, or this person has the ambition? How do we uh, decipher that both at the stage of, say, hiring and
Mhm.
also at the stage of while working with them over the time? So, what are the traits we should look out for?
So I think when you're hiring for, when you're hiring for a creative studio, you're basically looking for two things. One is, of course, the skill set, right? And you hire, sometimes you do, and we have in the past, you've hired a star designer, developer, writer, knowing fully well that they are culturally not great fits. And I have done this, but knowing also that they last a year and then they're out. So if you have that, because the friction will be so high that at the end of 1 year, you will get rid of them. But sometimes you just need them, for a project, for a whatever. So that's a very short-term tactical, and that's how you should address your skills. But the large hires are the culture, people who will fit in, people who, I don't have a template for this, but people who have the same values as you. No, I think that we often as studios, we don't think deeply enough about that. But could you ever abide somebody who was fundamentally dishonest on your team? No, you just couldn't. So I think to me, that's very, very important. The cultural fit. Would you want to? We always used to ask ourselves this, right? Would you go out for a drink with that person and just talk the whole evening about something else? Doesn't mean that you have to get personally involved. Everybody has different relationships, but could you sit at a bar and talk the whole evening about something, anything? If you can't do that, then it's going to be a hard thing, right? Because you all have to work in very close proximity.
This is a
So I
great
would say,
point, I think.
yeah, we always had that. I'm telling you, even when we did the acquisition, it sounds so ridiculous, but we would actually ask ourselves, okay, we have to work 5 years on a payout. Could we work with this guy? Would we have dinner with him? I mean, yeah, yeah.
It's a great point. And that also, like, I'm also thinking this, we had this conversation before. That we don't want to, like, most teams don't want to end up like, once you start to become conscious about this, you don't want to hire too many people who are like you, right? But still, you want to be able to spend time with them, even though you are not similar people, you still want to be able to spend time with them. So this yardstick is a pretty great way of doing that. Like, even if this person may have very different opinions about a lot of things, would I be able to sit down for a dinner with them, or I have go to a bar with them for a
Yeah, and
meeting?
in fact, I think absolutely you must, that's the point we didn't talk about. You must hire to supplement the skills that you don't have. It's so important for the creative process. I mean, the worst thing you can do is hire people like yourself. But to me, somebody who is totally different to me is far more interesting than somebody who's like me. So I would rather sit with that person at a bar for hours and hear their point of view, because they have such a point of view that is so dissimilar to mine.
Right, absolutely. I mean, one of the points you said actually brings a follow-up question in me, which is, how do you want to hire people who share the same values as you are?
Yeah.
Now, as a studio, how do you also find and define the core values and the core voice of a studio? This is a question that we have been grappling with, and especially with team members and all, even within ourselves. Like, it's so hard to do that, and I can tell you two parts to it, and I'd like your comment on this. One is, like, you have this I'm just using the word a romantic notion of be true to yourself, have your own voice, and all of that. And then the other side is this practical side, that what is the missing piece in the market. You just try to find out that, hey, everyone is
Yeah.
talking about this, but no one is talking about this. Let's go for that. Now this is purely strategic. This is not about what your inner soul says and things like that. So when you're talking about, again, a small team of 10 to 15 people, how do you find that, define those values, and how do you find that core voice and positioning for yourself? What are your thoughts on this?
I think the first thing you have to do, and this is a hard one, is that you have to go and find out what people say about you when you're not in the room. So nobody does that. It's too much of intellectual, okay, let's do an offsite and discuss amongst each other. Don't go there before you have actually rung up your clients and had a coffee with them, or even people who didn't give you a project, and say, can I have half an hour of your time? Why didn't you give this to us? Could you just first, once you do that, it will become so clear how you need to define, then you are finding the intersection between what people really perceive as your core strengths. I mean, it'd be such an eye opener. Do that, and then it's really finding the sweet spot between what your core strengths are and what the market wants and will value.
Right. And does this change over time? Is this something that you can just define it once and just stick with it for decades to come? Or do you think the market also, everything keeps changing so quickly?
Yeah, no, I think that your core values don't change. The core values that define your culture, very much it is who you are. I don't think that changes. Your offering to the market should evolve over time, because the fields we are in are evolving over time. So very simplistic example would be, say, traditional brand design firms now adding digital capabilities.
Yeah.
So there's no way that, and who knows what this metaverse will bring for both of you. So I don't know about
Absolutely.
that.
No idea. Web3, metaverse, NFTs, no idea what this is
Correct.
doing.
So
Okay,
yeah,
so
so
let's
will evolve.
talk about the core branding execution. When we actually want to do it for our studio, when do you think is the right time, or what are the right set of criteria, or what with what motivation should a business, and in our case, creative studios, go for a brand refresh, or maybe defining the brand as well, in case you have not done that? When do you think that's the right time?
So there's no such thing as a brand refresh for a creative studio, because your brand is being
Okay.
built from the day, from the day you took on a client or made a hire, your brand is being built. So the exercise to do is stay in touch with what people are saying about you. That's your brand. We don't do that at all. That should be almost, according to me, an annual exercise, right? It should be an exercise that you do at the end of every project. Sit down with your client and say, tell us, now the project is done, right? Everything is out of the room. Tell us what you would have liked us to do differently. What were the pain points? I mean, get feedback on that, bring it back to your team and discuss it. So I think that's got to be an ongoing process. And the earlier you do it, the better. Like you said yourself, Shravik, I mean, you do 2 decades of work and then you think, oh man, we haven't documented any of this. We haven't put it out. We've lost touch with those clients. It's too late then to do anything about it. So start today, and start small, but put some processes in place.
Right, but what about things like maybe the logo, the brand statement, or if there is obviously studios like us, we have been around for 10, 12 years or more, and what happens is, and this actually happens with our clients as well. Our clients
Hmm.
come to us to get their web design redone because they are turning 10 or turning 20, or just think of this milestone that is
Correct.
happening, so we
Yes.
should do it.
Yeah.
So do you think such a refresh in that sense, or in that context, like maybe have a new logo, or maybe not logo, just redefine, or restate your ambition or mission or vision? How frequently do you think that should happen?
See, when you restate anything, when you restate something or you change your logo, it is an opportunity for people to look at you. Why do people use these milestones, right? Because they want to signal to the world that something has changed.
Hmm.
So when you do a brand refresh, and it can be changing any element from a logo to whatever, uh, announcing a new location, announcing a product, you are telling everybody, look, something has changed, look at me. So people will look at you. And if you don't have anything to address that answer, what has changed, then it's a failed, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a pointless exercise. So you can't say, oh, we've reached 10 years, so we have a new logo.
Got it.
That's just, I mean, do it, but it won't bring you anything. If you say, we've reached 10 years, we are evaluating, we've thought about who we are as a studio. We're now going to be doing 1, 2, and 3, which will benefit you in ABC ways.
Hmm.
And by the way, what do you think of our cool new logo?
Got
That
it.
is a much better exercise to do.
Absolutely. So you're saying that you have taken a call about what direction you want to change and what
Exactly.
mind space you want to hold in the future. Where do you want to go? You
Yes.
have a clarity in that. That's when,
Yeah.
by the way,
Yeah.
there is a new logo attached to that
Exactly.
thought.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly. Always.
Got that. So, do you think there is anything known as like a brand fatigue after a while? Like, do you think that after hearing the same studio's name after for 5, 10 years, you just want, okay, what are the new studios around, or that is not something that we should be
I think that's a
concerned
good
about?
question. I think clients will always shop.
Hmm.
So there is, I don't think that's anything to do with brand fatigue. I think it is far more to do with, they want to know, they don't want to miss out. It's more a FOMO
Hmm.
thing. Like, oh,
Got
is
it.
there some cool new studio that I should be talking to? That my boss will say, oh, you're just speaking to the same old studios. Why haven't you spoken to this hot new person? It's far more FOMO. And to keep our sort of position stable, we have to convince them that we are on top of the hot new things. That's the communication I was talking about. But there will
Got
always
that.
be this rise of studios, and you know, I mean, some people hold their positions longer than others, but there will always be the hot new studios. But
Hmm.
honestly, in a country like India, I don't know. I mean, now let's see with talk of this recession, what happens in 23. But in a
Hmm.
country like India, there will always be enough work for small studios.
Yeah, we hope so too. Uh, all right, and when you're getting any kind of a branding done, do you think that a studio should invest its own time, or should you just dedicate a budget and hire an external agency for that? Where do you see? Because there is a reluctance, I would say, in hiring external expertise when you feel that you are yourself a creative studio. You should be able to do it by
Yeah.
yourself. Photoshop, you make your own logo, kind of a thing. So where what will be your suggestions or tips around, should you do it in house or should you look else outside help?
So this won't be a popular answer with the branding studios, but I'm just saying that, ask yourself, what is it that you absolutely can't do on your own? What is it that is very important to your future as a firm, and you can't do it? And then, of course, budgets and things. I mean, if you're flush with funds, then why not hire some sort of really, brand expert to do your new logo? That's fine. But to me, the more important thing is that if you feel you just can't arrive at this definition of your culture, or you just can't arrive at a future roadmap for the company, then I would rather get external help on that versus, say, the redesign of your website.
All right, I think that's a great way to like give us a direction around how to think about this. You've given us a lot of things to think about, Meeta, and I'll just like to conclude this conversation at this point in time, touching upon all the different things that at least I feel I learned in this. I think we started out with saying that lot of us don't uh, undertake this defining brand and all because of the fear of not doing a good job, and that is one of the biggest thing to overcome in a way. And then you nicely added the four different parts of a brand, which is our creative work, a culture, thought leadership that we can have, and what is the experience of working with you. And that is one thing, what is the experience of working with you, that actually came out as a uh, quite a big thing for me, or a new thing for me, because we are always thinking of brand from acquisition of a new client or a new person, new people getting to know. But even if I think of the B2C and the products I'm using, customer support matters so much, and the relationship that you have with your existing client matters so much. So that was a great point that you added in this. To be able to value a brand from the perspective of the volume of incoming new inquiries, that's a great way to measure it. I think that's one interesting thing also I learned. And uh, the uh, the idea that if you have a specific client in mind you want to reach out to, then think of what can you do to help them, what is their problems you can solve, and from there approach that part of the customer service. And the point on ambition, like a great point, that how much the team has an ambition to grow versus the founder's ambition, and what do you want, and how do you hire people who have the similar values. Can you go to a bar and talk to team members for all evening? That's a great test for new hirings. And finally, the biggest point I think you dropped at the end was stay in touch with what people say about you. That's such a lovely point because it's so hard to do. I think that's kind of a summary of what all we touched upon. Any final words of advice with respect to branding for small studios, Meeta? And then we can close the conversation.
No, I just want to say it's not as hard as it seems. Honestly, and once you start doing it, you will find that it's not such tough going. So I think the hard part is just starting. Once you do that, it will build momentum by itself.
Right. I wish I was sitting in your side and I could see it so clearly, but I guess this conversation is taking me one step towards your side. Thanks a lot for Meeta for lending us your insights on branding and positioning your studio. To our audience, hope you enjoyed this episode of Two Studio Heads. Please follow us on @2studioheads on Twitter and send in your feedback and suggestions. Please also tell us what you think of our brand when we are not around, because that's the new learning that we have. We have to take feedback. Also, if you'd like to participate in a future conversation, suggest topics or guests, please reach out to us through Twitter. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Nita.